we are going to hack through it. I'm pretty pumped. We got some cool stuff to talk about tonight. So
That's right.
I'm pretty excited here. And
we'll kill the penalty and we'll get back to full strength next week.
Yeah. And I'm actually extra excited because I have been, if you've listened to our episodes, any of our past episodes, and I shouldn't say any, but almost any, because I talk about games from Matt Ugg all the time.
Yes, you do.
On the podcast. I definitely have highlighted some of their games, even on like our holiday episode where I featured like some of my favorite games that I played over the course of the year.
Yeah.
And they actually teamed up with another developer that we're pretty big fans of, DevDwarf.
Yes, sir.
Who actually typically works with Lumoth, who as a composer, we had Lumoth on the podcast a long time ago.
Yep.
They kind of team up together and they have a company or dev program or whatever. They're a developer called Noisy Bug. And then Connor Grail and Matt Ugg typically work together. And now Connor Grail, Matt, this is getting way too confusing here. God, hold on.
Not to me.
Now I got it. I got too into that. Let me start that over. I'm sorry.
No worries, man.
Hey everybody, welcome to Pursuing Pixels. My name's Kevin Portelli, and I'm here tonight with Randall Nolery.
Hello.
And that's all you're going to get from us this week, folks. It's just the two of us. We're running shorthanded, and probably the most shorthanded we've been in a while. I think it's been quite a while since we've had just a twofer episode, a little duo. But I'm pretty excited. We've got a pretty nice slate of niche games here tonight to talk about for the most part. So
hell yeah.
Stay tuned for some games maybe off the beaten path that might not have been on your radar until today.
That's what we do.
Or maybe they were. But yeah, I'm extra excited because one of the games we're going to talk about, and the game we're going to talk about first, is a game called Self, all caps, by the way. And this is a game from Matt Ugg, who is a designer that I've really, really gushed about on the podcast a number of times. I've been trying to get Randall or John or any of these guys to play some of these games with me or try them out. And finally, with this newest release, that not only is this from Matt Ugg, and then he usually works with Connor Grail, who does the music and the sound design for the games, but they also teamed up for this particular game with another one of our favorite designers, DevDwarf.
Yes, sir.
Who worked on Leanthus that we talked about a while ago on the podcast. We actually interviewed the composer that worked on Leanthus a while back, so it's kind of this cool little like homogenous indie community that get together and work on game jam games, and I think that's what Self was originally conceived as, and it sounds like they were just like, hey, this is pretty cool, and we're not quite done yet, and we want to make a few more levels, so let's just not worry about pushing it out for the game jam, and let's spend a little more time on this.
How cool is that? Like, they felt that secure in what they had going on here. Like, you know what, forget the game jam. Like, that was our spark plug, but, like, we have something here, and we don't have to just submit it for that because we know we got something here.
Yeah, and it's like we still were able to use like whatever. I can't even think off the top of my head of what the like theme of the game jam was, but like they were able to use that as like you said, like a springboard for like the inspiration and like those limitations being placed on you of like, you know, sometimes the theme will be like no power or no or one room or something. So you got to figure out, okay, I got to make this whole game in one room or at least incorporate that theme in some way. And you might spawn an idea that you would have never come up with without that restriction. So
absolutely. Like
I said, I don't know exactly what the theme of this game jam was, but as far as the gameplay goes, it's kind of a pretty straightforward 2D platformer. Side scrolling, kind of single room challenges for the most part. There's a little bit of scrolling here and there. But it's pretty bite sized. I was able to play through the game in a little under 10 minutes in my first run. Yeah. I don't know how long your first run took, Randall. Was it roughly the same or?
Probably closer to 15. But I also took the time to like, at first I was playing just keyboard controls, but then I'm like, I've got that 360 controller, that wired 360 controller. Let me break that guy back out and wipe the dust off and plug it into my iMac and see if it would recognize it. And to its credit, like in the browser, it super did. And then I'm like, oh, I'm very much into this once that got working. Like that was the key for me.
Yeah, and it's a really cool. So basically, again, you're controlling this little like 2D platformer self.
Yep.
That's walking around, and then you have this like soul or ghost kind of. I'm assuming it's like your soul.
Let me read to you the short pitch that's on on their itch.io page. Who are you? Self is a short game about a lost soul. Recover the fragments of your self. Be touched by the higher being. So you are the lost soul recovering those fragments. And yeah, you can do so either you can jump as this little creature that's, scrolling back and forth, 2D, like Kevin said, mostly single screen, but you have this core mechanic where this kind of red soul spirit kind of balloon kind of inflates out of you that you can kind of control in a direction left or right to kind of propel yourself outwards to gather the lost fragments, essentially.
Yeah, you can almost your character will follow the path of like the line that you draw with the soul, and then will kind of, when you get to the end, it kind of launches you, so you can kind of like launch yourself upwards, almost like a double jump, or to get a little extra height, or throw yourself like a little bit off to the right to clear a large gap or something.
Yeah, it's a really cool gameplay element. I caught, especially once I had the 360 controller plugged in, I'm I get this. Like, you need a controller. This.
You need a controller.
I agree. Like, that made it so much more fun. And like, I'm trying to think, like, what was it like? The spirit control, the soul control kind of reminded me of something. And I was racking my brain for a couple of days. Like, I know I'm going to be talking about this. What does this remind me of? And in a good way, it kind of reminded me, control wise, it was kind of similar to like the disc golf mechanic in like Golf Story, or like where you kind of control left or right that way. But I don't mean to say that disparagingly, because I know some people didn't like that. I feel like you have...
Oh, I thought the disc golf was fun in Golf Story. What I remember,
once you got used to how that controlled, and like you realize it's just kind of that left, right, that's kind of how it is based on the perspective of your character. Or kind of like curving a shot in Windjammers is kind of the same way. And like, I felt that same feeling of control here in a really good way, where I could make kind of like snap control decisions on like the way I wanted to go and send that spirit up. And you can either like let go of it earlier when you're holding the button down, so your like spirit balloon is kind of like curving in whatever direction you point it, and then let go, and it'll like kind of pop out, like spring out from that in that direction. If you let go of it early, or like it kind of has its own built-in timer where like you hold it to a certain point, it's going to burst and kind of shoot your character off. And man, you can do a lot with just that core mechanic.
Oh yeah, because they start adding in like those extra, they're almost like upside down like crescent moons or something, but they essentially give you like a double jump, or if you collect that while you're in the air, like Celeste style, like collecting the gems, so you can do the extra dash. So they do start chaining in things like, as you're climbing up like a vertical shaft, that you have to keep kind of like launching yourself into those moons to recollect your jump. Like there will be maybe a platform or two that you can land on and like for some safety and like regroup for a sec, but you can make a mistake too and fall all the way back down, which is really, really cool.
Yeah, but they don't punish you for said mistakes. You just start over at that screen essentially.
Right.
Which is always... I love that modern touch in many games, honestly. Like, let's do away with the concept of lives. That's like that doesn't impact the fun either way here. Like,
yeah, it certainly wouldn't have been any more fun if we had to keep starting from the beginning of the game every time and trying to get all the way through. Right. Although I've been hanging out in Dev Dwarf's Discord lately, and people are going nuts speed running this game.
Oh, sure.
Like, they're coming in under 2 minutes on the speed run challenge. I'm like, Jesus, do you guys have anything? This game just came out today.
That's awesome.
Like when I was, maybe it was the day before when I was in there, but I was like, geez, this game just came. Like, there's no way it is a small game, but like you already have this memorized and like such second nature that you're beating even Matt Ugg's best time of the game, and he's got some speedrunning chops, I'll say.
Yeah. I get it though, because it just feels good to play. Like I even, I completed it. I'm like, I completed that in 15 minutes. How cool is that? I basically did that on like a work break. And then I'm like, you know what? I still have this controller plugged in. Let me play through a handful of levels again, just because like now by the end of it, I'm like, I really understand what they're doing with this soul mechanic. And then it just feels good to just utilize it when you're in full control. So I know they're aiming to make a full experience out of this if they can raise some revenue, and I'm definitely a fan of this concept, so I hope that they do.
Yeah, did you happen to mess around with the endless mode at all?
I did not yet.
It's interesting because at first I was like, well, I wonder what this is going to be. Is it going to be like procedurally generated levels or what's the deal? But it's actually, I think it changes over time. I haven't gotten that great of a score, but you start in just like a single room that just has like one little platform that you can start on. But if you land on it again, it disappears, like, or you'll just break right through it.
Sure.
And they're just 5, like, kind of set up like when you roll like a die or roll a dice, and there's like the 5 dots on the dice. I'm trying to think of what that pattern is, but there's essentially 5 of those crescent moons in that single room.
Oh boy.
That re-give you your double jump.
Oh boy.
And it's just about getting as high of a combo as you can get without touching the ground again, and just getting as high of a score. And I just, like Dev Dwarf was saying, like, oh, it gets pretty crazy after 50. So I don't know if things change, because for the most part, like, you just have to kind of, it's all about timing, because like those little like recharges, or those little moons that recharge your soul mechanic, like they take a second to respawn. They take quite more than a second. So like you really have to time when you're launching yourself and where you're launching yourself and the order that you're grabbing those in to get your combo up.
Oh yeah.
Like I think my best combo was like 14 or 15. But people were like on Newgrounds, it actually keeps track. Like there's like leaderboards and stuff, which is crazy. But like somebody had like an 87 combo. It's just like, yep, I don't think I'm going to hang. Although Dev Dwarf did throw down the 100 challenge. He's like, I'd like to see you go for 100. And I was like, all right. Wow. You just had to lay down the challenge. So I might give it a try at some point. But it's another cool, like, just added mode to be like, oh, if you really like the mechanics, it's a cool, like, fun way to kind of like, I get hooked into those high score chasing things.
Oh yeah, me too. I didn't realize that's what it was. I should check that out. That's cool.
Yeah. I wasn't sure if it was just gonna be like, oh, is it just gonna like maybe loop the game or something, or I don't know. All right, so we can probably stop gushing about Self at this point, although I could keep gushing about Self forever, sir. And I'm sure we'll be talking about more Matt Ugg games in the future, because there's more that I've played that I still haven't talked about on the podcast, and more that you need to play for sure, Randall. Like, it just the guy's a puzzle platformer, action platformer, arcade platformer genius. Like, I love his games so much. So
yeah,
definitely check him out, and you can play them all right in your browser.
Love it.
Yeah, and Dev Dwarf too. I don't want to sell.
Oh yeah,
sell him short. But I would just say that these games, or this game in particular, is more reminiscent of the games of Matt's that I've played, as opposed to Dev Dwarf's of their like solo output. I guess. But yeah, real quick before we move on, I did want to mention, I kind of forgot when John and I were talking Pico 8 games a while ago. There's actually another fantasy console called the TIC-80, the TIC-80. I think it's like stands for tiny computer or something like that is what the TIC is for.
Okay.
But it's very similar. I think the only difference is it's like totally freeware, like the whole console. Like I think Pico 8's like a $15 purchase.
Yeah.
Like to have like the platform to develop for, where this is like a totally freeware or whatever.
Oh, I didn't realize that was the difference. Okay.
I'm pretty sure. I could be misspeaking, but we'll put links in the episode description to like the TIC-80 site and everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, I ended up finding this game called Fetch Quest when I think I was just looking for something else. But the only other game I've ever checked out from the TIC-80 is EmuROM, which I know we did talk about on the podcast a while ago. That was one of the first games from the Itch.io bundle for racial justice and equality that we brought up. And that game is still in development and is still looking awesome. I'm super pumped for that game. And then when I stumbled across Fetch Quest, I was like, oh, TIC-80. Oh yeah, that was what EmuROM, and it's got a very similar, like, it's very similar to Pico 8 too. It's got that 8-bit style, but I think the resolution is a little bit bigger. Like you can do widescreen instead of full screen, or at least it doesn't have to be like a square resolution. I'm not positive, but it's still got that more like PC, like almost like again, it's more modern than Commodore 64, but it's like it's got more of that PC look to the graphics than Nintendo 8-bit, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like a MS DOS type of thing.
Yeah, that's a better way to put it. Is like the MS DOS era.
Yeah.
But anyways, it's like this was like a short kind of obstacle course maze platformer, not too different from Self in the sense that it just like get to the end of the game. But the game just kind of opens up and you're playing, has like a little opening cutscene that you actually control. You're in control of a little pup, a little dog.
Nice.
And you're playing fetch with your buddy, this boy, and he throws the ball a few times. And then the third time you go grab it, you bring it back and the boy's gone. You just see the backpack sitting there. And then all of a sudden you're trying to bring the ball back to the boy, and you're just like, got to get to the end of the level, but you have to carry the ball with you at all times, like while you're wall jumping and going through all the platforming and stuff. And then the only other mechanic other than jumping and wall jumping and stuff is that you can bark, but when you bark, you drop the ball. But sometimes you have to bark to do like some minor puzzle solving.
Nice.
But you have to keep carrying this ball with you at all times. And this is a game that really kind of focuses around speed running to the point where like if the ball gets stuck in a certain spot, you can like hold down a button combo that will bring the ball back to you, but you get a 3-minute penalty for using that tool.
Okay.
And then there's like speed running modes. There's also a double jump mode for like if you want to play it a little bit easier. Like it's not necessarily like a totally like infinite jump or something, but it's like, oh, okay, now you can double jump. It's going to make all the platforming quite a bit easier throughout the game.
Right.
But there's just like some really cool like little puzzle platforming, and it's like the ball, like everything else just controls like a normal puzzle platformer or like an arcade platformer, but the ball is like really bouncy and physicsy.
Okay.
And there'll be like, as you're climbing up this tower and getting higher up, and you don't start out in a tower, but you're kind of like at some points you're climbing up.
Yeah.
And then there'll be like little grates that you can walk over them, but the ball will fall through those grates, but you'll have to like bark and like, there's like these little like demon things, or I don't know, that look like wizards or something. I don't know, but you bark at them and they like move a little bit, and then you can jump on their heads. And there's no combat really, but again, if you bark and you drop the ball when you bark, and then if there were a couple times where it just kept like it started like bouncing down, and it can go down multiple screens, like just keep going. I thankfully didn't have any like terrible like, oh my god, I got to do that all over again.
Yeah.
But like, it's a really cool. It was really charming. I'm not going to spoil the ending, but it had like the ending kind of hit home a little bit. I wasn't expecting for a game that took like 25 minutes or so to play through.
Oh, that's
I was
nice.
kind of like, man, that was something. I didn't expect that. So
yeah,
I just wanted to give that game a shout out because I thought it was just so charming and really polished, and one that I just love these little platformers. I probably will keep it on my computer and have it at the ready to just kind of play whenever. I'm not going to go for top speed run times or anything, but just for my own fun, it's just a fun game to play through. So
yeah, I definitely need to check out Fetch Quest. I'm definitely getting hooked into those little bite-sized experiences like that. Just self-contained, under half an hour has just more and more appeal to me. So
yeah, just get straight to the point, in and out, and yeah,
I know,
I love
it's
it.
Awesome. Yeah, and I love these retro-inspired experiences.
Yeah.
I will mention that I've still been playing Paprium. Actually, thankfully, thanks to Analogue, they've made that retro experience a lot easier for me to play because they updated the system, which is a cool thing they can do with systems like the Mega SG, which plays the Genesis games.
Nice. And that's like a firmware update,
yes,
right?
They released a firmware update with a bunch of fixes and updates, but one of them in particular was making Paprium run correctly, which I really appreciate Analogue for because Paprium doesn't even work on some like actual official Genesis models, so I don't fault Analogue for that whatsoever. But I appreciate them for releasing an update so quickly to make it run. But yeah, now like all the font and UI stuff in Paprium's not garbled. I can actually read like, oh, this is my character's name and like their hit points and stuff. It's not just all like jaggy, garbled font, and like at the end of the levels I can see what is being counted up for my scores and stuff. So that's added a bit to the fun,
Yeah. And you're still enjoying it for the most part? Like,
I am.
Plan on seeing it through and everything?
Yeah, it's a long game, so I still haven't beaten it. So I'm still going to keep playing it, with those arcade sticks, which are awesome. That's still my favorite part of that package is those Grand Stick 3s that came with it. But yeah, I'm still going to play some more Paprium. Definitely more interested in continuing to play Paprium now that I can actually read what the hell is going on.
Yeah, that helps the cause just a little.
Yeah, although I'll give them credit, like even without like knowing what anything says, and maybe this is also because I've just played other foreign release games without problem before. A lot of Japanese releases, like being able to read the stuff never really impacted too much of my enjoyment, of Paprium either. It's the core beat 'em up gameplay and presentation is still quite good. So, although a lot of light strobing effects in that one, like be careful if you,
Yeah. I feel like that's just more and more these days. Like every game I boot up is like epilepsy warning, like watch out. And it's like I get it. I love the flashy lights and everything. It's eye catching, especially when you're like scrolling on Twitter or whatever, and there's like a GIF for a game, and they'll always catch my eye. But it's like, I don't know that I want to play that for multiple hours of like, strobe
on the
effect in my
eyeballs.
face.
Even without the condition, it's kind of a lot on the eyeballs that way.
Right. It's tight. It can be exhausting.
It can, yeah. My eyeballs have to stare at monitors all day anyway. Let's go easy on those guys. We got two of them. But yeah, more retro, because that's always what I'm into. So
yes.
Thanks to Kevin, you were actually playing some Fire and Ice before on the NES online service.
Yeah, which is the first addition to the Switch games like available on the via online service or whatever in quite a while, I feel.
Yeah, it has been a while.
I'm trying to think. Like, I think when they added Donkey Kong Country 3 was like the last update.
Yeah.
Maybe there was something in between, but it just feels like it's been a good 6 months or so.
It has been. We're no longer in the glory days of the Wii releases that way in the virtual console. We're long past that now.
Not even close.
Not even close. Although these are at least all included with your just Nintendo online fee. So, take the good with the bad, especially because Fire and Ice is an extremely expensive game. If you're going to try and buy a cartridge, you're talking about like at least $100, if not pretty easily more than that. So to get it on this service, to be able to actually play for the first time is really nice for both of us, because we're pretty big NES aficionados.
Yeah, that was always like kind of one of the few, like, that was like Little Samson and Fire and Ice were like the two games that looked really cool that I knew I was probably never going to have the cartridge in my collection. So it felt really cool that they added this one, being like, oh, I've always wanted to check this one out.
Me too. So this is a Tecmo developed, came out in 92, which is pretty late in the whole NES schedule. But you can tell, like, the graphics are nice. They're like colorful and really pleasant to look at, and they really do a good job communicating. This is ultimately like a mostly single screen, like, logic puzzler, essentially. But the graphics do a wonderful job communicating what your options are to, available to you at any given screen, and like what you could or couldn't do, and kind of just like God, why can't my brain work? The game with the rabbit, the logic puzzle game. Come on now, we talked about it.
Oh man, the first thing that came to mind was Bugs Bunny's Crazy Castle, but I know that's not what you're thinking of.
No, I still haven't played any of those games, actually.
They're not bad. I mean, they're just like puzzle solving. Like, they're not that different, although less emphasis on the platforming.
Yeah. What's the name of that game, Kevin?
Which, with the rabbit?
Yeah. The game we talked about, like the number one logic puzzler. It came out on like every console like 2 years ago.
Toki Tori?
No, where you push around the blocks and they make different things happen with the gameplay.
Oh, Baba Is You.
Boom.
Baba Is You.
Baba Is You.
Which I just mentioned like 2 weeks ago on the podcast when I was talking about Overflow.
There you go. That's the one. So that was a tangent just to get to Baba Is You, but
yeah, I don't even. What were you even bringing that up for?
Just that it was like another logic puzzler. I think that was the extent of that. That like allowed you to just see on screen, here's what my potential options are. Where similar to Baba Is You, I'm looking at a Fire and Ice screen, and before I like even move my character too much, especially as I got into like. I'm in World 4, so I played through.
Oh, you're further than me. I'm in World 3.
That's pretty good still.
Yeah.
Like
it gets tough pretty quick.
Yeah. It gets like, you have to like think kind of outside the box for this being a pretty, this is a long time ago this game came out, but there's some really clever things they're doing with these, level design for logic puzzle.
And you're not like, again, they are like these single screen like arcade levels essentially, but they're not. The gameplay is not arcadey at all. Like, I don't think you're on a time limit. You kind of seem like you're more on like a grid a little bit, where you're kind of moving like tile by tile.
Besides
with
the boss battles, you essentially have a time limit, because the screen, at least in my experience with the levels I played, scrolls vertically. So like you got to move a little bit more frantically on those boss levels, but that's only at the end of worlds. So there's only a handful of those.
Yeah, and the cool thing too is I think there's 9 worlds, and you can actually just go and play any level from any world at any time whenever you want. So like it is, especially for a game that is put like these logic puzzles where you might get stumped on a level here and there. Like it is kind of nice to be able to just, and I think Baba, as you had a little bit of that too, not anywhere you want, but it definitely let you skip around a little, which is I think ideal for this type of game.
Oh yes. I'm beating my head against the wall on this and I just can't like figure it out with my brain. So I just need to look at a different opportunity and come back to this.
And maybe that other one will like help you jog. You'll figure out how to do something. Like, oh, that's what I needed to do on that last one. Like, because you do kind of learn certain things of like, oh, this is how. Because you can just like use your little magic wand. And this game is technically a sequel to Solomon's Key.
Yeah.
On the NES, and like you technically, I think it's pretty similar characters, similar mechanics for the most part. But you're just trying to put out all the flames on each level for the most part, and you can like create an ice block like diagonally below you, or you can make it disappear, and that's and then you can kick them to the left or to the right until they hit like a wall.
Yeah, then otherwise, like if you're up against a single block wall or ice block, if you push against it, you essentially like jump up onto it. Like
right, so you don't have a jump button, but you can you can climb up like one ledge at a time.
Right.
And then the other mechanic that is kind of cool, and back to the graphics too, I love the animations in this game, like the way the character moves around. Like the first thing that blew me away was like, and again, where you can really tell that it's a later NES game, is like when sometimes you'll have like when you put two ice blocks next to each other, they like fuse together and will form like a longer block. And like you'll eventually, if they're connected to the walls, they'll stay kind of, they won't be affected by gravity, but then like you'll disconnect them from the walls and it'll fall, but like your character will kind of hold it with one hand like above their head and like shimmy underneath it, like really like crunched and like ducking. Like it's just so cute, but there's like so much like expression to that animation. Like it's just, I don't know. I really like all the little attention to detail and like little stuff like that.
Yeah, the presentation caught me pretty early on. I'm like, oh yes, like you said, you can tell this is a later NES game and like made with love. And man, I love that stuff so much. And this is one of those, like to the point where I'm like, how much is this going on eBay? Like I would love to own a cartridge of this, but like, oh yes, it's very expensive. That's right.
Yeah, it's still a pretty penny. Yeah.
Maybe not, but it's love to have it on here. And like, I definitely took advantage of like the rewind features. Not that it matters that much.
Yeah, but just to save some time.
Yeah. Just to save some time, like, oh, I dropped down, but because I can't make an ice block because it has to be below me and there's nothing below me, I need to restart. Which, to be fair, this game really doesn't punish you that way. There's no lives, and you pause and you just restart the level, and it is what it is, and that's totally fine too. Which I love that too. Like, what a cool thing especially in this era of the rental game, and they want to punish you. They don't want to see you complete the whole thing. Like, it being this accessible is not usual for 1992.
Yeah, the fact that you could maybe beat the first 5 worlds, rent it one time, and then, okay, maybe you won't be able to beat the game per se, but you could be like, okay, let me see all the other levels and play through them. And I know I harp on this a lot when we talk about like more of these kind of puzzle games that are single player, but they kind of can be played co-op. Like, I don't know if you had the experience of playing this with Tina on the couch or anything, but like, I love playing these types of games, and I mention it pretty much any time this type of game comes up, but where the gameplay is slow enough where like somebody else who's not in control can be like, hey, try this. And like, obviously that can be super annoying if you're not trying to have someone backseat game with you, or like if you're trying to solve the puzzles yourself, you're like, hey, come on, I was trying to figure that out. But like, if you're going in with that intention of like, hey, let's play this game and just kind of hang out and solve some puzzles. Like I love that experience.
Me too.
Of like, even if I'm not the one holding the controller, like it's really cool.
Sometimes it's honestly easier to solve the puzzles if you're not the one holding the controller.
Yeah, because you can kind of separate yourself from the character a little bit. Whereas when you're in direct control of the character, you're just kind of thinking like, what can I do in relation to my avatar on the screen? Whereas like, when you're looking at the whole screen, it's like, it's a little different.
But yeah, I think I would definitely recommend people, if you have a Switch and the online service, I would definitely recommend checking out Fire and Ice. I think it's a really good value add for the service, and I think it's a really fun game in its own right, even today. to play for those reasons. And yeah, Tina was on the couch next to me, and that's exactly what happened just naturally. She's like, what if you try this or that, like on this level? And like, oh yeah, sometimes that works, or gave me a different approach to think of to solve a given level. And yeah, if I really couldn't solve a level, let's pick the next level. It's not a big deal.
Yeah.
So like really enjoyed my time with it, like got pretty addicted to it. Still think I might keep playing it.
Same here. And I got my brother's been playing it a lot too. He's liking it even more than me. Like he told me this is in his top 5 games, period. I
nice.
think he meant maybe he meant NES, but he was like, this is top 5 all time. I'm hooked. And I think he's about where you are. He said he was like, just beat the 4th boss.
Nice.
And yeah, I don't know, like I feed off that, like if we're all chipping away at a game, like,
oh yeah.
Just like we were talking about with Enter the Gungeon not too long ago, like being able to be like, hey, DJ, hey, Glenn, how far are you? Like, I love having that, like, back and forth. So it's, having that, like, if we keep chipping away at Fire and Ice, that'll definitely keep me plugging away at it. So.
Yeah. Definitely a better experience than I had with the Immortal, which I think was one of the last games they released.
I fired that up, and it was like, what is going on? So yeah, if they're gonna kind of pull these games out that are a little bit out of left field, and for you and I, we were aware, being especially because it was such a rare cartridge. But like, if they are gonna not be releasing like the heavy hitters, which they've already released a ton of those, to be fair, but when they are pulling kind of these random, because the Super Nintendo games they released, I don't even remember what they were. I was like, I never heard of any of these, but like Prehistoric Dude or something, I don't know, but. I know we were also going to briefly mention too, because one of the things you can do, and I don't remember exactly how to go through this process, but I'll find a little video or a little link to where it kind of walks you through the steps and put it in the episode description. But you can also, if you have the NES Online service, if you go through the steps of making a Japanese Nintendo Switch account, you can actually go on and download the Famicom and Super Famicom versions of the online service as well. And unfortunately, it is all in Japanese. So if you can't read Japanese like Randall and I, you're kind of out of luck. But again, thankfully, most of these games are, for the most, you're probably about 80% the same games that are on the US service, but at the same, or the North America service. But at the same time, there's quite a few, probably 5 to 10 games that are not available in North America.
Least,
like
and I'll
offerings.
Say on those apps, at least the UI is like, even though it's in Japanese, is all like the same button prompts that it would be in English. So once like you've kind of gotten used to the environment, it's not so bad that way, at least.
Exactly, especially in the main like the UI menu of like where you're in the like you're on the Famicom. Okay, I know I got to hit ZL and ZR to go to the main menu. Yep,
exactly. So Konami's Ping Pong. Kevin, this is another game that you pointed to me, and I'm like, oh yeah, because I had refreshed my Switch. I had when the new version of the Switch, it's not even, I don't even know if I could say fully new version, but when they refreshed the Switch model, where they're like, oh, this one's got a better battery, but maybe a slightly worse screen. I'm like, you know what? No, I kind of want that, just because the battery aspect is important to me to actually play portably once in a while.
Yeah.
So I did that, but that also meant that like it start from scratch, have to re-download everything, have to reassociate all your accounts. And I had created a Japanese account, but I never bothered attaching it to the new Switch until Kevin poked me about Konami's Ping Pong. And I'm like, all right, fine. Let me go back and figure out what email I use and yada, yada. And I did. And I'm so glad I did. Konami's Ping Pong is good.
Yes. We're going to have to try playing this online, because I was curious what you think about it. Although I'm sure it's going to be really hard to be the person who's on the far side of the table. But yeah, this game is awesome. It's really unique, I feel. Yeah, it feels good. Like at first, and I'll say there is a learning curve. I felt man, am I just terrible at this? Like I understand. Like I can't even hit the serve. I can't even make contact on my own serve. Like I was whiffing hard for a little while. Because there's no like instructions you can read or anything. There isn't like a good. I did end up looking like up a wiki page for just seeing, okay, how do you do? Because the way the controls work, are you actually like the face buttons are essentially just like one button that you can either your hand, you just kind of have a floating hand there, like at the table, that kind of moves side to side and follows the ball sort of on its own. Yeah. And then you can hit one of the face buttons, either one, I believe, and it will flip your hand to like a backhand. Right. and you kind of hold that down, and then you use the D-pad for your different types of strokes. So like the left on the D-pad is more of like just like a top spin kind of regular forehand.
Yep.
Or I guess it could be a backhand too. But then if you hit up, that's more of like a slam.
Yep.
And then you can hit right, and that's more of like a slice or like kind of a slower chop.
Yep.
And like once I looked up what those all were, and like now I know what they are, and it like kind of tells you like, oh, if somebody lobs one, that's when you got to try to slam it, and like once you get in the rhythms,
like the sound effects kind of let you know, oh, they kind of like hacked this one. It's a lob. It's ooh, and that's when you can really slam that motherfucker right back in their face.
Yep, it's like that floater is coming right to me, and like it's just. I don't know what it is about it because it's a really simple game. You can tell it's probably an earlier NES game. I could be wrong there.
It is
like,
from 80s. So actually, this is a Famicom Disk System release, which is like
really
extraordinary and like even that much more likely that we would have never played this. Just because like, and this is the first time. Well. So even before, this came out on Virtual Console on Wii and Wii U, but only in Japan and PAL territory. So like never came to the US. And I have a lot of retro stuff, but I never have gotten a hold of a Famicom Disk System.
I don't even know if I know what one looks like off the top of my head.
I do, but man, they are finicky, and I just didn't want the hassle of like 1980s technology using analog tape stuff. But but it's on Famicom Disk System, and they brought it to the service, so really cool to play it, and no load times or anything. And once I got the learning curve down, at first I'm like, okay, I just want to score a point against the computer.
That was my goal too. I was like, I lost like 3 games in a row with 0 to 11 or whatever. I was like, just let me get a freaking point.
Yes. And then from there, it's like, okay, let's see how many points I can get in a round. And I'm like, I kind of get the control now. And I realize I'm not going to be able to like freely move my hand with a paddle back and forth necessarily. So like give that part of it up. Treat this more like the Wii Sports Tennis that way, right?
Yeah. That's a great way to think of it. Yeah.
Yeah. But you have like a lot of control on when you strike, and when you strike determines if it goes left or right. And it's like, feels really good that way, actually. Like you have a lot of control once you understand what's going on. Like
once you get the hang of like the visual like angle that you're kind of seeing things from, the physics feel pretty legit.
They do,
especially for that era. Yeah, you feel the like top spin, and you feel the kind of slice, you feel like the slow down of the pace, and you feel the ball kind of coming higher off the table, even though it's totally flat 2D. You know?
Yeah, it's pretty impressive that way, and like to the point where, okay, then I can build on my skills. Like now it's like, okay, this is not an embarrassing loss anymore. Okay,
right.
Oh my God, I actually won a round, and then like, oh my God, I actually won a match. Like, let me move on to like level 2 computer and see if I can actually stay competitive. Which like I started getting my ass kicked again. But
that's so fun. We basically had the same exact experience with this game. The only difference is I don't think I've actually won a full match yet, but I definitely did let me just get a point. Okay, let me see how many points I can get. I had the same exact feeling of that. And playing on level 1, of course.
Yeah. Oh,
I know the NES era is a different type of difficulty. Like nowadays, I would start right in the middle. I'd start right on 5.
Oh, my God.
Here, we're starting on 1.
Absolutely. Yeah, because the difficulty's already above the board as it is. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean, they can just they know what they're doing. They can react to with those types of games. It's like the computer is just programmed to return your shot, pretty much.
Yeah, and they do on level 2, even with your like your slam shots back at them, they'll like return it like at least half the time. I'm like, oh, okay.
Dang. All right. And like you said, we should probably just harp or like kind of drive that point home. The timing of your stroke is like, it plays a huge factor of like the angle. And then again, being able to swap between backhand and forehand and then timing is like really the whole core mechanics and then your few different strokes that you have. But like
to the point
like
where
you said, you just feel like you have so much control. It feels really tactile, considering that you just have like a dismembered hand floating in front of a ping pong table.
Yeah.
It feels very like tactile.
Yeah. From a game that came out originally in 85 and ported to Famicom Disk System in 87. Like crazy. And like, yeah, to the point where once I got used to the controls and knew what I was doing, I was hitting shots where it like just barely hits the side of the table and goes out, which is a point for you. Like I could do that on purpose once in a while. Like,
yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Like, so yeah, I'm definitely into it. And yeah, to be able to play that online is pretty cool.
Yeah, I kind of honestly, I hadn't even thought about playing 2 players. And actually, now that I think about it, I don't even know for sure if there is 2 players. But I feel like there is, because I thought when I was reading about
at least, you know, you look in here, it looks like 2 players available. Yeah.
Yeah, because I feel like when I was reading about the different shot types, I thought I saw something that said something about, if you're on the far side of the table, it's way harder to control, that goes for any game like that, you know. Yeah. Anytime you're playing a soccer game and you're coming towards the screen and not away from the screen, like you know which way you want to play.
Yep.
You know.
Definitely.
Yeah. But it's pretty cool, and again, just a nice little like kind of hidden bonus gem that you can, if you go through the small couple extra steps to get the Famicom stuff on your Switch, are really cool. Even if you just boot it up, I'm sure I've said this before, but just fire it up to like look at all the box art for the Famicom games. Like they're so cool.
That was the first thing I said when I reinstalled it. I'm like, man, the Japanese box art on Famicom and Super Famicom is so much better. It's so good.
Much better. Every game is better. Yeah. There's not one that I've seen where I'm like, I think I prefer the North American box art. Not one.
I can't fight that.
I'm sure there's some toss-ups, some coin tosses, but there's definitely not any that I'd say like, oh, that's way better.
Yeah, no,
they're just more cartoony and colorful in most cases, which is just more my bag.
Kirby's smiling more often in the Japanese releases. That's nice.
Exactly. And he's pink. Yeah. In the original Game Boy games in North America, they made Kirby white.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
at least on the very first one.
Yeah, they mimicked the black and white, which was kind of a weird choice that way.
Yeah. Very bizarre.
Right. That is
very
weird.
Bizarre.
Yeah.
Maybe pink wasn't cool enough for us North American boys. You know, they're not going to get any boys playing Kirby.
I was absolutely a boy playing Kirby, and I had a great time.
Kirby's some of the best, man. Yeah. Some of the best.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I think before we wrap things up tonight, we can go into a slightly less niche category. We've been going, digging into some niche stuff with, when you let Randall and I run wild, we're going to just dig into it. But yeah, we've been, we're always hyping up Game Pass too on the podcast.
Yeah.
And how, just a few weeks ago, we were talking about Cyber Shadow. That was one that we were able to play like day it came out, or I don't know that I fired it up that day, but like, hey, this brand new game just came out and it's on Game Pass. Yeah. And like they really do a great job of supporting the indie games. I shouldn't say that because I don't know how much they pay them, but they do a great job of getting indie games out there more.
They sure
do. Hopefully it's paying off for the developers, because there's so many. Like I was just thinking, like we were talking about a few other games. We were talking about Carto the other day, and I was like, God, I never talked about Scourgebringer. I never talked about Goner 2. I never talked about West of Dead.
Killer Queen Black just released
Renegades.
On there.
Yeah, Killer Queen Black. Hopefully that'll boost up the online community. I know we've mentioned that a few times. So just so much cool stuff, and constantly being updated. Like few times a month, there's like a good chunk of games added. But yeah, I real quick, I feel we both have been, or I've been playing some Carto, and I think you said Tina was playing some Carto while you were kind of hanging out and checking out the game as well, which is yet another one you can kind of, backseat play as well. I would say it's a pretty casual top-down adventure puzzle game, I guess, with it's totally non-violent to the best of my knowledge. It's got a really great, like, kind of watercolor painterly style. Watercolor might not be quite the right, but it's almost like, or like construction paper. Like, I don't know. It just looks really like handcrafted.
Yeah.
And
it does. It's very charming. It's very pretty. It's very laid back. And even without the like logic aspects, it's just fun, to be the co-pilot, just like absorbing it, on the screen. It's just, it's a nice, cute, fun atmosphere of a game. And like you said, non-violent, just takes it really easy. you know?
Yeah. And it's got just like the really soft, like kind of music where it's almost like, it's not just chimes, but it almost has that feel where it's just like the wind chimes are just, you know, pleasantly clanging in the background. And like, you just get some little, like the sound design is really great. All your little foot, you know, pitter pattering on the ground. It just like, I love like the attention to detail in this game is really great, even down to like the opening cutscene, which I love so much. It's just like a few quick like storybook comic panels that have no dialogue. There is dialogue in the game, but no dialogue in this opening cutscene.
Right.
And it just kind of gets you right into the action. Like no BS. Even the tutorial is like kind of just like, hey, you're in the game and here's the one thing you need to know. And that's pretty much it. And you just start playing. And the one thing that you need to know is that it's basically your, you know, it's like a top down exploration game, and then you can essentially the map is broken up into like a grid, and then each grid of the map is like a tile piece or a puzzle piece that you can, once you collect more of them throughout the world as you explore and solve more puzzles, you can actually move those around wherever you like and connect them. And the only kind of caveat is that like you have to connect like types of land or water to like types. So like if they'll as you get further into the game, they'll be like, oh, here's a little kind of like drier area. You can kind of tell like these are the plains maybe, and like here's a forest and here's a river, and here you just have to make sure like the sides that are touching each other are matched up, so they're not like puzzle pieces that have like shapes cut into them, but you just have to make sure the two sides match, I guess.
Right. And you'll get like puzzles to solve, like I want to go visit my uncle on the east side of the forest or something. And then it's up to you to go into the kind of map mode and take the tiles that you've gathered so far to rearrange them with those constraints that, you know, like tiles terrain wise need to be touching each other to kind of flip your whole map around, essentially your whole playing ground, to achieve that goal of like, okay, how can I set this up where like there's land on the east side that's past the forest, and once you do that successfully, then you know your uncle's house will pop up and then you can go visit that, and then by doing so, you know, you'll get a couple other tile pieces to, you know, continue propelling it forward. And yeah, it's just a really fun laid back experience that way. It's good.
Yeah, and one of the things that is going to probably keep me plugging away at this one, although I haven't gone back in a little while, it's been a little bit since I played last, but like at first I was kind of thinking like, oh, it's going to be this huge game. Well, maybe not huge, but one big game, one big map that you're kind of interconnecting and throughout the whole game and building upon. But so far it seems like I've kind of traveled on to like, I think I've made it to like a third island, and each island kind of has like its own set of tiles and puzzles to solve, and then you kind of venture on to the next area. But it's not like when I started up, I was kind of thinking like, oh, am I going to have to like keep all this stuff in my head and keep it fresh, like make sure I'm kind of remembering how I had the map set up last. But it seems like you can kind of divide it up into chunks.
That's nice.
A little bit easier, which is, again, that was probably the one reason I hadn't started it up before that, because it really caught my eye. But I was just like, I don't know if I'm ready for like a 20-hour adventure. Again, I have no idea how long the game is, but you know, I don't know if I have that like commitment in me right now, but the way it's kind of structured so far, at least, it's really, really nice. And I am kind of engaged in the story and stuff. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
It's minimal, 5 to but 7 it's cool.
hours. So that's, that doesn't seem too bad.
That sounds like our style.
I know. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, especially if they keep adding stuff to Game Pass, like we were saying, you know, if they just keep bringing stuff nonstop. I know, is there anything else on Game Pass that you've been like eyeing up and wanting to play? Or
man, you mentioned the Falconeer, and I'm like, oh, so I downloaded it, but I haven't started it yet. So
is it Falconeer or Falconeer? I keep calling it Falconeer.
I think it is Falconeer. Yes, the Falconeer. Yes.
Yeah. I couldn't remember, because now I was like, I'm sure there's a game called the Falconer too.
No, Falconeer sounds a lot better than Falconer. Yes.
Yeah. I played just a smidge of that, but I would be super curious, because I know that was like more of like an Xbox Series X kind of console release. So I'd be curious to see how that one, because it looks really nice on the Xbox One even. So I'd really be curious to, we should dig into that one in the future, because it's kind of like an aerial combat. Yeah, it's really cool. We should definitely dig into that one.
And I definitely want to sync up on Sea of Thieves, because Rare continues to just consistently support that release and made it into this whole full out, fully fledged experience that has been around for most of the Xbox One's life.
That was pretty early on. Yeah. And, you keep hearing about stuff like No Man's Sky that kind of had a flop launch and keeps getting updated and gets all this praise. But you don't really hear that about Sea of Thieves,
not the same way.
I feel like it maybe had a similar trajectory where it came out and it's like, a little bit left people wanting a little bit. But now it sounds like, hey, they got a whole experience here.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah. We definitely got to sync because that's online only too. So we definitely got to sync up on that one.
It's a Rare game, and I love Rare stuff. So why not? Yeah.
Yeah. I just want to real quick give a shout out to Star Renegades, just because I don't know if we're gonna get to it on the podcast at any point. Although I want to, if we sync up on it or if I get sucked into it again. But it's its own game, so I don't want to sell it short. But if you enjoyed games like Into the Breach and or Slay the Spire, and I know that's high praise, but it really combines a lot of elements from both of those games in the sense of like the turn order and knowing what's happening and being able to kind of negate damage, but at the same time, it's like a deck building card sort of turn based. Like it's not deck building, but it just has some of those Slay the Spire combat mechanics where you're like stacking abilities, and if you like elements of those games, and if you also like sci-fi cyberpunk kind of RPG, not even cyberpunk really, but just kind of sci-fi RPG stuff, it's a really cool game. There's even like some relationship building mechanics between like on your individual runs. It is a roguelike, so it's like but the runs are a little deeper. Like it's like they're gonna take you, it's more like Bad North style, where it's like a run is like maybe a couple hours, I would guess. I've never beaten it, so I have no idea, but it's like definitely one where you're probably not gonna beat it in one sitting. It's not like fine. XCOM style where it's like permadeath 40-hour campaign, but I don't want that. So this is kind of perfect.
No, I'm into that, and I'm into the run base, and man, the sprite art. I'm into that.
I can't believe I didn't mention that because it is phenomenal, and there's a few different kind of views. Like you kind of like the overworld is like this kind of top down, like really, really zoomed out perspective that is cool looking and eye catching. And it kind of has this 3D look to it sort of. Yeah. But then when you get into like when you get into a battle, like into like the Slay the Spire type, it's like that same kind of view angle. But it's got this like, this slightly isometric like 3D view. And like they're like these giant mechs with just a ton of detail. Yeah. It's so great. It's got a really great like fast forward mechanic too, where you can kind of, once you pick your moves and stuff, you can fast forward through them. And it even does like kind of like a VHS like rewind or fast forward effect. Like it kind of statics up the screen a little bit. It's really cool. It's like the presentation's top notch. And again, like I don't want to oversell the game by comparing it to those two games, Slay the Spire and Into the Breach, but I don't think I'm like way off base by saying that it compares to those two games.
Nice.
I'm
With
a
the
huge
sci-fi
fan of that
element.
one, so.
That's nice. Yeah.
Man, there's so many of these we got to dig into deeper. So, let me know if there's ever any of these you want to dig into, because, man, I got to play more Scourgebringer, too. That game is awesome. I honestly got even more hooked into that than I did Hades, and I was kind of playing both right around the same time, so. Man. Has similar kind of combat, at least really fast pace, so.
There's no excuse if you got the Game Pass subscription, that's for sure.
Get in there, and definitely check out some of the indie stuff. Don't go right to the Gears of Wars and the Halos and whatever. Play those too if that's your bag, but definitely check out the indie stuff as well, because they are cranking them out on there. So,
absolutely,
But if you're feeling good there though, Randall, I think we can probably call it a week there.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, next week, hopefully we'll have John back with us, but if not, you might be stuck with the two of us again, but either way, you're in good hands. Exactly. Yeah, we'll play ping pong all day. But either way, you'll be in good hands, but we'll be back next week. And as always, you can find us on the internet. Nice and easy way is Linktree/Pursuing Pixels, but we're on Twitter, Instagram. We got a nice growing Discord community. It's even a little more organized now, so you can find the conversation threads you want to, jump into and whatnot.
Thank you, Kevin.
Shoot us an email. Let us know some games we should check out. And otherwise, we'll catch you next week. And until then, take care.
Bye-bye.
I can't tell if you're trying to keep rolling off of that or if I should restart this.
It's up to you.
Let me just restart.
Yeah.
I just feel like an idiot. I'm just going to start even just from the top.
That's fine. I did like a weird hey thing anyway, so I still have no fucking idea. Like you did the hey everybody. I'm like, son of a bitch. I say hey everybody. I got to say something different, and I've never found my identity since.
Like I said, I've never whatever you say, it never catches me off guard where I think like, what? Or that was weird, or that was kind of awkward, or yeah, Like I've never once had to be like, oh, let me shift what Randall said so that doesn't sound weird or whatever. It always sounds natural to me.
Yeah,
so.
I try to sound natural.